Welcome to our webinar on plugins, do's, don'ts, and those to download now. My name is Lexi. If you're not sick of me yet, I'm kind of the eyes and ears and technical support behind our webinars. So excited to see everyone, and just a few housekeeping items. As always, we are recording this webinar. If you've got to jump out or you're coming in and watching at a later time, all of our webinars are recorded, as well as we will have the transcript available afterwards with links to all of these plugins that we mentioned and these lovely panelists. So keeping that in mind, there is the webinar chat. Feel free to jump in there, join in the conversation, tell us where you're viewing from today. And then we also have the question and answer in your Zoom toolbar. If you have questions for our panelists, we are going to take questions towards the later half of the webinar. Please use the question and answer to drop any questions. That way it makes it easier for us to kind of sort through that. We're going to go ahead and get going. If you didn't know, this is part 2 of a 3-part webinar series. Last week, we were joined by some great panelists talking about plugins 101, kind of the basics. And then today we are here to talk about making the most out of e-commerce plugins specifically and Woocommerce plugins. We know there's a lot in that ecosystem. And then next Tuesday, we're going to tread into some water on artificial intelligence plugins, talk about what we're seeing out there. Are we trusting them? What plugins are we loving? And just kind of riff on that topic. Our agenda for today, we're going to go through welcome and introductions. We'll go over just a brief Woocommerce overview if you've never used it or you're interested in starting an e-commerce site. And then we're going to introduce this great panel of guests and get through some questions. These are great e-commerce experts, and we want to ask them some questions on e-commerce plugins specifically. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Enid Jimenez, who is a director of engineering here at WP Engine, and she's going to take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Lexi, for the warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here today. Like Lexi said, I'm going to do a little bit of an intro and overview of Woocommerce, introduce our panelists, and then we're going to jump into the discussion. Our goal is to keep this conversation informative and engaging. So like Lexi said, just feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'd like to apologize for the video and my network connectivity. Just technology is not cooperating today. And I'm having to call from my iPad while I'm juggling monitors. But I'm very grateful that Lexi is my backup today. So with that, let's just get started. So my name is Enid, like Lexi said. I'm a director of engineering for e-commerce initiatives here at WP Engine. And that means that I lead from the technical side of the house, the various things that we're doing in the e-commerce space. I work very closely with our product managers and other business functions on defining our vision, our strategy, and translating that into actionable initiatives and plans. So to set the stage, let's do a little bit of an intro of Woocommerce, WP Engine's offering, and alternatives. Can you move? Thank you, Lexi. So as many of you know, Woocommerce is the most popular e-commerce integration for WordPress. It transforms a WordPress site into a customizable e-commerce store. By transform, we means that you can add the ability to, for example, add a shopping cart to a site, a checkout process, and essentially you're turning that site into an online store that transacts. Woocommerce is a free plugin. And like we said, if you could move up to the next slide, Lexi. So Woocommerce is a free plugin. It's been around for quite a while, since 2011, if I'm not mistaken, and it's widely used. It was built for WordPress with the intent of adding commerce functionality to a WordPress site. Again, turning them into online stores. Woocommerce preserves many of the core functions of standard WordPress, but it adds that e-commerce functionality and capability, configuration, and customization. Like WordPress, Woocommerce is open source
I'm going to jump in here. Anid warned me that her connection is just a little bit shaky. So I'm just going to jump in on the Woocommerce overview. As we mentioned, Woocommerce is built as open source. So although it is a free plugin,
so that means that you can adapt.
Hey, Anid, just real quick, you are muted for some reason.
Yes, because I got frozen. I'm so sorry.
You're back if you want to jump back.
Okay, I'm not so sure where I left off. Just bear with me if this happens again, Lexi, and feel free to make decisions. So WooCommerce, like WordPress, is open source, and that means that you can adapt it, you can build add-ons for it, and there's a huge worldwide community of users and developers, including what is known as the Woo experts. There are thousands of worldwide developers that create and sell Woo extensions. Some of them are among our panelists today, and you can download the plugin from woocommerce.com or from wordpress.org. WP Engine has a WooCommerce offering. In our offering, we provide a number of features that are well integrated with WooCommerce. I'm not here to talk about the WP Engine offering because this is a webinar. This is not a sales pitch. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website or you can talk to our sales reps. You can do that directly from wpengine.com and then just click on the products page. It's important to note that if you're not tied to WordPress, there are other alternatives out there. These are some of the very well-known names in the e-commerce space. And so you probably are very familiar with some of these names, and some of them have WordPress integrations, notably Shopify and BigCommerce. So now that we have that high-level overview out of the way, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First and foremost, on behalf of WP Engine, we thank you so much for making time today to be with us. We know that everybody's super busy. We have people all over the world. Kathy is just dealing with that tropical storm and dealing with technology issues, but we're all very grateful that you're here today. So what I'd like to do is for each of you to introduce yourselves. If you can just state the obvious, like your name, where you work, a little bit about your expertise in the WooCommerce space, and if you could share with the audience one actionable insight about WooCommerce sites, that would be very helpful. So with that, I'm going to start with Patrick.
Ooh, I get to go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick. I like to joke that I've done every job in e-commerce. So I built sites for clients. I worked for WooCommerce as support, developer, and then product manager. I built courses for LinkedIn Learning. I wrote a couple books. And I sold my own physical product, Fry Thief, which I should have on me, but I have a little board game called Fry Thief that I also sold on my own WooCommerce store. So I like to joke that I've done everything, and my one piece of advice I'd give to the audience is to start selling quickly, because you'll learn more if you build your store and launch it quickly than if you take 5 months to build a perfect store. So that's me, and that's my piece of advice.
Thank you. Experimentation. That's my takeaway. So let's move on to Marcus. I'm just going in the order that I see you guys on my screen.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm Marcus. Thank you for having me today. I am WordPress user from the early years, let's say it like that. In my teenage years, built my personal blog, built some websites. Nowadays, I'm CMO at Insight. We are Europe's biggest WordPress agency. We are more than 130 people worldwide building WooCommerce and WordPress projects. Some things we've done in the recent years in the WooCommerce space is that we have developed some of the biggest payment gateways, Payoneer, PayPal, Molly, to name some few. And we have, beside WooCommerce specialized plugins, developed some of the most popular WordPress and plugins anyway, like BackWP Up, Multilingual Press, or let's say Central Stock, which we probably going to talk about in context of that WooCommerce session today, because they really can amplify your shop in going multilingual and synchronize your shop between different languages and so on. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you so
My
much,
favorite
Jim.
advice, sorry. I missed that. So my advice would be test your backups, because having a backup plugin installed and running is one thing. Feeling safe that you can actually restore that if something breaks is really a game changer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Another good developer advice, back up your things. James, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. So I'm James, I'm in the UK. I started building plugins for WooCommerce back in 2011 as well. So it sounds like I was right there at the beginning. And currently I run Iconic WP and Audible under the Stellar brand, Stellar WP, which is owned by Liquid Web. And I also have a product called Settery, which is kind of a personal passion project of bulk editing WooCommerce products. So kind of touching many sides of WooCommerce and have been for many years. My piece of advice would be to use an SMTP plugin, which basically is going to ensure that your e-commerce store is actually sending emails. You see quite a lot of fresh WooCommerce users set their store up and then they question why their store's not sending emails. And usually it's because they need an SMTP plugin.
Thank you, James. Emails, again, make sure that you're communicating with the buyers of the stores. Kathy, I'd like to go to you next.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Kathy, developer based out of the US normally, and today I happen to be based out of Boca Chica, Dominican Republic, because I'm with Team USA competing here this weekend. I have been a tiny developer shop for about 10-ish years, and I have developed and maintained about 3 premium commerce plugins, so a little bit more specialized than some of the other panelists. Like, really stuck on my plugins and not gotten to do too many other tasks, but I think I do that part pretty well. What's my one piece of advice? Test your upgrades, I guess, because like use in staging. I mean, a lot of posts are now offering staging as a feature, but if you don't, there's a plugin that I love called WP Staging, and I usually send it to all my customers to say like, hey, go test this fix, go test literally anything you want to test over there, and let me test things over in your staging, so that when something inevitably goes wrong, like it's happened in staging and on your production site.
Nice. Thank you, Kathy, and thanks for joining and being able to be here. I know Kathy was nervous about internet connection, and we're going on the fly with internet connection.
Development practice stage before you push it to production. Yes.
And lastly, I'm going to let Adepeju, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Last but not least.
Thank you so much, Lexi. So my name is Adepeju Oduye. I work at Automatic and I manage the Woo Marketplace vendor program. So it's actually really cool to be on a panel with some of our vendor partners like James and Kathy and Marcus. So with the vendor program, that means I work very closely with many of our third-party partners, their inventory, and essentially help our partners sell and better serve like our mutual customers, i.e. merchants and our developers. So and I've been with Automatic for three years, which is crazy. It's gone by so quickly. I guess time flies when you're having fun. So one of the kind of like insights or the FYIs or did you knows is that the marketplace is currently just shy of 900 products. So this includes extensions, this includes themes, and this includes SaaS inventory. So not many people know that we are growing our inventory in the latter 2 categories. And kind of like just a general FYI best practice is to take advantage of being able to test. I think someone mentioned testing before, but take advantage of being able to test an extension or a plugin that you purchase. You know, if you can return it, you can, but just test it, make sure it serves your purposes. And then, you know, if it's not working for you, go on to the next one. There's definitely a lot of options for folks and merchants to test, take advantage of it.
Thank you so much. So that's a good segue into one of the first topics that I wanted to introduce in the panel. So we're just going to move into Q&A. So we've talked about WooCommerce being extensible, right? So, you know, at the page you talked about the marketplace. That means plugins, and more plugins. And there are just so many out there. And, you know, there are just various ones for different use cases. So I'd like to ask the panelists, are there any favorite ones out there that you would like to recommend? And you can double click on some of the ones that you already mentioned.
Yeah, I can jump in. So in general, I wouldn't necessarily recommend any specific plugin. My view would be, you know, you want to install plugins that are serving a purpose, which I think you mentioned a second ago. You can't, you know, every plugin's not going to suit every business, so you want to go out searching for plugins that solve a specific problem that you're having. I mean, there's going to be more generic plugins that maybe offer backups and that kind of plugin you might have recommendations for. Oftentimes your host will offer those anyway. But you may have more general plugins like SEO plugins. I know if you sell subscription products, then the WooCommerce subscriptions plugin is the best in its class at that. But generally, yeah, you just want to make sure that any plugin you install is serving a purpose, and, you know, solving some need that you have.
Let me jump in and speak to one common need. James, I think I agree with you on all that. I think one common thing is it's really hard to get attention online. And once you get someone to your store, I'm all about how do you install the right plugins to get people to have a big checkout, increase your average order value. That to me is one of the best things that I can think of to make your business profitable. So I look at things that like improve your carts, like WooCommerce has a couple, like composite products, product add-ons. James is too modest. There's Iconic Sales Booster, which is like a WooCommerce cross-selling plugin. And there's WooFunnels, which I think rebranded to Funnel Kit. But just it doesn't matter which one you get, but get something that helps you go from a $20 order to a $50 order, and your business is going to be much healthier.
Awesome. That's great advice. That's because ultimately, you know, that's the goal of having an online store, right? You know, transact and increase, you know, the volume and value of those transactions. Anybody else that would like to chime in? Kathy? I think you're muted.
I am muted. I don't know that I would have anything in particular to recommend specifically, but yeah, just sort of following up with the gentleman ahead of me, like, you know, take stock of what you are selling and how you want to sell it. Like how do you want your business to be, and then make sure that the plugins sort of match that, because you can. I think what we said, there's like 900 plugins in the marketplace and an infinite number beyond that. Like you can borderline make your site do anything you kind of want to. You can have sort of a unique story, even if WooCommerce, you know, WooCommerce is the same, but then it gets you like 80% of the way, and then that last 20% you can take it in any direction you kind of want to go. That, like I said, sorry, I'm blanking. You know, make that 20% you, I guess.
I'd like to double click a little bit on something that, you know, James was talking about. Use a plugin to solve a specific problem, right? You've got problems and things that you want to accomplish, and that's what, you know, that's how, you know, you're going to be searching, you know, for plugins. I believe, you know, Marcus and James, you know, both of you guys have developed, you know, plugins. So can you tell me a little bit more about how did you get there? What were the problems that you were trying to solve, and what led you to creating a plugin?
Yeah. So I personally used to run a web agency. So we would work with customers mainly in the UK who would want a website building. And part of that would be solving these specific issues that those customers are trying to solve. So a good example of that would be our Woocommerce plugin, which is an iconic plugin. The reason we built that originally is because Woocommerce out of the box didn't make it possible to assign multiple images to a product variation. So Woocommerce was actually called multiple product images for variations when I first launched it, which is a ridiculous name. And that was back in 2011. So that plugin is one of our most popular plugins still. And we built it for this customer back then, and kind of asked their permission, would you mind if we released this and sold it as a plugin, because we think other people would use it. And that started my journey of building plugins and selling plugins. And a lot of our other plugins came from similar scenarios. Like our delivery slots plugin was a customer that wanted to be able to offer delivery slots to their customers, so their customer could choose a date and a time to pick up an order or to have an order delivered. So yeah, a lot of our plugins are kind of functional in that way. They're solving a need that an actual customer had. And yeah, we grew from there.
Great. Marcus, I think you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, it's same for us. Our agency basically evolved in that open source ecosystem or space. We have a lot of developers that started as freelancers or just WordPress or Woocommerce enthusiasts and start building sites, and then seeing, okay, I need a plugin for a certain use case. I need to solve a problem. And this is where we have two different ways to proceed. Sometimes we just develop little plugins like search and replace or add minimize and contribute them to the open source community for free, so everybody can use them and adapt them and build up on them. And sometimes we see a use case or a business case in it where we see, okay, this makes sense to make a product out of it, because the use case is so big that we actually need more resources, more developers, and a whole team to maintain that, to market that plugin, because we need some kind of user base on it and let's say revenue stream to keep working on it, because it's getting so big actually. And the most popular plugins we have, like BackWP Up for backups, but there are other great ones out there too, like it was said, most hosters these days offer backup plugins, or if you want to check out Updraft Plus, that's also a great plugin. We have some use cases we're working on since many years. So backups, multilinguality is a huge thing for us here based in Europe, where we have that 25 countries, at least in the European Union, which having a lot of different languages. Of course, nowadays, most of our clients are global anyway, so having a shop in different languages really is something that can bring you quickly into different markets. And we have a not Woocommerce exclusive plugin. It's also just working for any WordPress site. It's called Multilingual Press for making your website multilingual based on multi-site, which is something I really want to recommend to think of if you want to reach different audiences with your shop in different languages. Think of if you're going on a single site or on a multi-site version of it. There are great plugins for each case out there anyway. There are pros and cons, how you synchronize your stock inventory later. And if you're unsure about that, better reach out to some of the awesome freelancers we have in the ecosystem, or to some agencies that can help you with deciding how you set up your shop because you want to scale. Anyway, so working with WooCommerce self or WordPress self or working with our clients is how we see use cases and then develop a plugin, create a cool solution for that, and then move on and iterate and make it better.
Awesome. So, so when you're finding these use cases, there's also, there might be a solution out there. I might not have to, customize something, right? But it's a huge, ecosystem, right? The ecosystems of all the extensions, that are out there, for WooCommerce. So can you tell me and tell the audience a little bit about, what are the themes, that you look for to find those best of class, plugins? Is there a common list of things that you're looking for that that leads you to believe that's a great plugin?
And
Anybody do?
yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm happy to answer this from kind of like a marketplace perspective, because how I see it is, with the marketplace, it's us basically choosing on behalf of a merchant or an end user. So when you think about choosing the best, I wouldn't again necessarily say it's the best, but it is this idea of, in the world of ultimate optionality, how do you kind of like surface the ones or surface or introduce kind of like a set of standards that anyone who's going into a certain environment choose again and again and again. And what we prioritize in the marketplace, because there's that responsibility of managing the WooCommerce code base and the core merchant experience, we take it seriously, what type of standards we try to introduce and implement on just like a scaled and iterative basis. So our goal with the marketplace is to surface options that incorporate, like when any product is launched, it goes through kind of like a baseline code review process, a UX review, business review, like how is it serving, how is it serving merchants, what is it built for, what are kind of like some supporting rationale behind it. So that's kind of like at launch, but I think the biggest thing is, the maintenance aspect of it. Once it's launched, how is it continuing to uphold those standards? And again, the marketplace for us is about providing tools to our partners to help facilitate that. So of course, that includes those actionable analytics like refund reasons, feature requests, just general stats that can be helpful to figure out how to update, tweak, improve a product. But also we recently introduced this quality insights toolkit that is right now available to marketplace vendors, but eventually will be available to everyone who is building an extension. And that includes the ability to run automated tests for compatibility with the most recent versions of WooCommerce and WordPress, end-to-end tests, activation tests, security tests. So essentially, again, it's just providing those type of, internally in-house building or understanding what those standards are, creating tools, and then putting it out there for our partners to use to ensure that end users are benefiting and know what they're getting whenever they purchase and download an extension from the marketplace.
Thank you so much, for that insight. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add to that? Patrick?
Yeah,
So
I'll jump.
I'll
I'll jump in a little bit. So I can't tell you what makes the best plugin, but I can give you two flags that come up for me when I see a bad plugin. And those two flags are, one, if there's like very infrequent updates, if they haven't updated the plugin in 2 years, it's like there's in eCommerce and in WordPress and in open source, there's infinite edge cases, and developers are always fixing, we have to adjust this filter, we have to update this, we have to PHP compatibility. If you're not updating frequently, there's either not many people are using the plugin, or they're probably just not catching these edge cases and not fixing them. So I would always trust someone who has more updates than someone who doesn't have an update in a whole year, something like that. The second one is in eCommerce, you're more locked in than you are in a brochure website. So like in a regular WordPress website, you can switch out your contact form really easy, no harm, no foul. But in eCommerce, like let's say you install a loyalty program plugin, you can't easily switch that. If you don't like it, it's a pain in the butt to switch to a different plugin. So because there's so much more of a lock-in effect, I try to only buy from companies that pay for their time. If a company says we have a $10 lifetime deal for this loyalty plugin, I know I'm going to switch that plugin in 2 years because the company went out of business. I want to work with people that help so they can keep doing the work for me every single year. That's why I'm building an e-commerce store. Is I'm trying to build a business, and I only want to use tools that are not going to evaporate in 2 years. So those are the two flags that I watch out for.
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
that's a good point, actually. The cheapest option isn't the best option. I think that comes down to. I think it's worth mentioning as well with the WooCommerce marketplace and the WordPress repository, which is where you download the free plugins. Both of them have processes in place that analyze the code. WooCommerce more so. As an author uploads the plugin, it will analyze the code, and they've got a preset list of things that they're looking for to check that a plugin is high quality and is not going to break things. So specifically, the WooCommerce marketplace does a very strict job of that, and that's not just for the first upload as well. That's every update thereafter. So you can usually trust that the code quality of plugins, particularly on the WooCommerce marketplace, is going to be pretty good, or at least following the rules of what makes good code. But I think as well, kind of Patrick touched on it as well. One of the key things that you want to look for is reviews or feedback on the quality of support from the company you're buying from. Even if a plugin doesn't do exactly what you want, I know as a team at Iconic, we spend countless hours customizing our plugins so that they do what a customer wants, and that's why we've got so many good reviews for customer support. So I do think looking at comments about customer support is a very valid thing to do. And then finally, I mentioned to Joshua in the chat, other places to look for quality plugins is the Facebook groups on the WooCommerce groups on Facebook and the WordPress groups on Facebook. Both of them have pretty active communities that will recommend plugins and give you honest feedback about if a plugin is good or not. But you kind of have to take everything with a pinch of salt. Not every plugin is going to be suitable for every person, but you can get a broad idea of what makes a good plugin from people.
Awesome, that's great. So, just in general, there are technical things, to look for, right? As well as the not so technical considerations, that you should take into account, how often has the plugin been updated, the type of support and so forth, because, if something happens and it's software, right, you want to make sure that you're getting the support, that you need to solve problems that move forward. So this kind of, it's interesting to see that you've got, the more solid technical things, to look for, and then there's the consideration of other items of things that you need to keep an eye on. The one thing that I didn't hear that I want to touch on is security, right? Which probably falls in both aspects too, but it's top concern, for merchants, right? You're transacting, right? And these merchants, you're getting access to personal information and so forth. So just keeping things, secure is typically, top of mind for merchants and for developers, right? So, so my question is, are they things that, people should be looking for, when they're selecting a plugin from a security perspective and a business perspective, just on that specific topic? Any recommendations on what to look for and what to avoid as well? It's super important. Marcus.
I mean, what Patrick and James emphasized is basically that you're building a business and not just a website to sell things quickly. So you should be very thoughtful and very strategic in the plugins you choose, and you should not see it as a $100 purchase for your first plugin to solve an issue. You should see it as you are getting in touch with a business partner with which you probably will stick with for many, many years, because you have that lock-in effect when you choose a payment gateway or a subscription plugin, or whatever you do on an e-commerce store really is hard to migrate. So that was a very big tip. And if you have doubts of security issues, which I'm not a technical person, I'm not a developer, so this is maybe like what qualifies me to say that, go to a developer or an agency if you have security issues. You cannot check that as a user. You can rely on the audit that the Woocommerce store is doing on the plugins. This is really, really a good audit, an extensive code review of the plugins you have in the official shop. But if you have doubts of security and want to check which data is processed, where is it going, if it is GDPR compliant, or getting you into any trouble, let someone look at the code or the implementation you have done, and let's just double check it, invest in that.
Yeah, there's a
Thank
good
you so much.
service called PatchStack, patchstack.com. They're pretty active with kind of live tracking vulnerabilities in plugins. So if security is of concern, I definitely recommend checking them out.
Thank you so much. So there's all kinds of plugins out there for various use cases, and it's very likely that you will end up using plugins, right, to extend and customize your store. It is not uncommon for developers to worry about plugin bloat, right? I got too many, it's slowing my site down, and so forth. So do you have any recommendations? Do you use some threshold that you say, at this point, you've got too many? Any common mistakes that you see people make, and recommendations that you would like to give the audience to avoid those situations?
I'll go ahead and start. I think it all depends on speed. Mostly matters for the customer. So as long as your website is loading quickly for the customer, you're generally good. I know some WooCommerce store owners who have hundreds of thousands of orders, and the admin's a little bit slow, and that's fine. That's a manageable problem because they're your employees, and you can work with them on that. But really, the thing that you need to watch the most is the speed for the customer, and you can test this both logged in and logged out. So are they a guest or are they logged in? There's some little bits of differences there. But just make sure that as long as they're adding products to the cart, and you add a product to the cart, and if it spins and spins and spins and spins, you're going to get people dropping out of your site. And then I don't think there's a magical number of plugins. It all comes down to, as long as page loads, what is it? I think the rule of thumb is 3 seconds or less. As long as page loads are 3 seconds or less, you're generally good. So I just, as soon as you start getting towards 7-second page loads, tons of people are dropping out of your website, and you got to fix something. And it may be one plugin, maybe 10. There's some sleuthing to do, but focus on the user, both logged in, logged out. Add a couple products to the cart and go to the checkout and see how long it takes you.
Yeah, I don't think the number of plugins is necessarily an issue. You could have 100 high quality plugins that all run perfectly without affecting page speed. The issue you will face with having too many plugins is probably compatibility. Between those plugins, there's a lot more to maintain in that respect. I personally don't think there's any limit on number of plugins that you install. Like it's all just code that runs at a certain point. If the plugin is coded well, it's not going to be interfering with general day-to-day stuff. It's going to be specifically targeted at doing one thing well. in theory, but you know, there's outliers that don't follow that practice and maybe load scripts where they shouldn't be loading. So it comes down to choosing the right plugins and making sure, like Patrick was saying, you know, pay attention to if something is slowing the site down dramatically. Reach out to their support if it is. If they say, you know, it's meant to do that, then probably move on to find a different plugin. But yeah, in terms of the volume of plugins, I don't think it's necessarily an issue how many you have. And I see quite a lot of people will, they'll say, you know, I need my store to do this, but I don't want to use a plugin. What code snippet can I use? And to me, that's exactly the same thing, just that they're not clicking an activate button. So yeah, there's no real difference to using a plugin versus putting a code snippet into your theme. You know, it's the same. The code that's running is the same in theory.
Yeah, one thing I
Thank you
would
so
say,
much. Kathy, I've seen.
no,
Oh.
a little delay. No, one thing I did want to add was I agree that there is no kind of like magic number in terms of number of plugins. What I have seen is that the mix of type it's evolving, right? I think some folks, that's why you have some merchants, some larger merchants who are testing, you know, more with SaaS mixing, kind of like their fully functional extensions or plugins with SaaS products, so that maybe they can lighten some of that that code flow and improve performance. But we've definitely seen high performing sites with dozens and hundreds of plugins that work well. So it is about maintenance, and it can be about the mix plugins or product types.
Let me jump in, Enid, to just sort of say, I think one of the two gentlemen mentioned this, but like obviously the more plugins you have is not necessarily an issue of performance and if they're all done reasonably well, but like the more moving parts you start to get, obviously the more chance for something to go wrong. So, I mean, that's the single most difficult thing I deal with in supporting my current plugins is like eventually like they will just not work with somebody else's plugin, and it's like it's completely unavoidable, but it's not a great experience for the user, and it's not. I mean, like I said, it's the most difficult thing for me to solve because I literally have to say, okay, I can't fix it with. Can't fix my plugin working with plugin X, because if I did, that's all I would literally do. So there's, I guess if I had to you can't put a number limit, but the limit would definitely be don't use any more than you absolutely need. Like, can you get away, use the lowest that you need to make your site work the way you need it to work, and audit that every now and then.
Great, thank you so much. We want to make sure that we have time for to address some of the questions that have been put on the chat. Lexi has been helping me with that, you know, just keeping track of them. So I'll just jump into that if we're all okay with that. So I'm just going to go in the order that Lexi has been collecting them for us. So question is, what emerging trends do you foresee in the realm of WooCommerce plugins that businesses and developers should prepare for? More forward-looking.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer here is AI. You know, that's a massive trend that's emerging at the moment. Very early days, I would say. You're seeing a lot of plugins that aren't necessarily going to be around that long, but there's definitely some great innovation coming out in that space as well. And I think your next webinar is on AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, such a huge, you know, trend. It is the thing, you know, nowadays, you know, AI. So I do encourage, you know, all of you to attend, you know, tomorrow's AI webinar. Anything else? Any other trend? Or next Tuesday? Thank you, Lexi. All right. Next question. Analytics are so important. Would love to hear what you are using to track revenue, etc. WooCommerce, Google Ads, GA for tracking. in the realm of analytics.
Metoric, I would say, is the best at that. It's a SaaS solution. That's metorik.com. Built by a guy called Bryce, who used to work at Woocommerce, and it's just a really great solution. So you connect your store to it, and it gives you so much reporting that you'd struggle to find something that you can't do in it. So yeah, definitely worth checking out.
Awesome. Any other ones that anybody would like to?
I'll just add, so Metric by Bryce is fantastic. Excellent recommendation. I used to be a huge fan of Google Analytics, and I always wanted Google Analytics to have like every piece of data that I could send into it, because you can see this user did this and they landed the landing page and they bought in 5 seconds. Wow, that's crazy. You get to see really cool stats with Google Analytics, but GA4 has been rough to implement. I've implemented on a couple different sites, and it's not intuitive. And I have to keep watching the same YouTube tutorials. I'm like, how do I? Oh, right, that thing. So I for a beginner, I don't know if I'd go ahead and set up GA4, but if you don't get e-commerce tracking to work right away, don't stress about it. It's just a little bit complex. But I think you want one source of truth. And so maybe it's WooCommerce, maybe it's Metric, but I think you want a source of truth that does track all the revenue coming into your store. And maybe it's a CRM, so then you can message individual people based on what they've purchased, or an email marketing tool like Klaviyo. Again, because then you can see this person purchased a thing 3 months ago. Let's email them again today. But I think you really want to work with those systems that have all the data, as much data as possible. And it used to be Google Analytics for me, and if you're an experienced store owner, go ahead and do that, but it's a little too hard for newbies is what I'd say now.
I think even if you're experienced, it's not easy now.
It's challenging.
Am I right in saying that Metoric doesn't track it doesn't track users, it's more for reporting
Correct.
on orders. So
Correct.
You won't necessarily know where a user's come from, why they've purchased, which Google Analytics was the best for, but even now, like for Iconic, we struggle with actually tracking that data now, especially with GDPR and all that kind of stuff. Like you say, Klaviyo and the CRM tools like ActiveCampaign are pretty good at doing that kind of stuff. And there's a few other privacy-focused analytics tools like Plausible HQ, Use Fathom, that you get less data from them, I guess. But as a starting point, they're easy to configure, and they're not Google.
Fantastic. So I think the next question is really, really important. It has to do with the high performance orders. I forget what the S stands for. Adopage, you have to help me here, table. But we know that Automatic has been working on this. And the question is, are there any specific type of plugins that are having issues with the new high performance table, or any types of tips for making the migration for existing stores?
So like I can answer this from kind of like the plugin extension perspective. I mean, in terms of, I can't necessarily say which ones are struggling within the context of the Woo marketplace, but I can say that again, because it's WooCommerce, we take on the responsibility of ensuring and working with our partners to ensure that their products listed are compatible with HPOS. So that has been an ongoing effort for the last few months, and it will continue to be so for probably the next few weeks. And I think we'll switch it on to as the default setting it was originally going to be in July, and now it's going to be probably later on this year, might be later October, if I'm not mistaken. So from just kind of like the inventory that's in the marketplace and how we're preparing those, products, that's what's top of mind on our end to make sure everyone is compatible there.
Fantastic. I think it's a super, super important topic that all developers, should be following. So this is probably a good question for Marcus. This is kind of like an agency related type questions. For small shops and small stores, at what point does it make sense to use an agency to help with the implementation and maintenance of the store? How do you go about finding, the right agency / consultant?
Yeah, the right agency is the keyword here. There are Woocommerce agencies or freelancers for every size of business, I would say. If you are running a business, if you are running a shop, and your goal is to not just being a hobbyist with it, but you want to take it serious, I would highly recommend to go immediately to some technical expert that can help you working on that, because you basically, as a non-technical person or someone who has some little abilities there, cannot see certain things you have maybe within your website on regards of technical debt or security issues we have talked about, or just identifying the right plugins and implement them the right way. If you are really small and making a little revenue, I would maybe recommend looking for experienced freelancers, not going on cheap platforms, but there are like good communities, there are bigger sites that recommend real experts. Next step would be going to a small agency, and then there's basically no limit. If you run a multi-million-dollar shop, there are enterprise agencies ready for you, and each one will step you up another level and bring your shop forward. I think it's important to find the right partner and not to commit something that is above your budget. The sky is the limit. If you go to an enterprise agency, they can build you a shop for $1 million. Is that reasonable for you if you're not having the revenue of it? No. So don't fall for pursuing something which is not in your budget or not fitting your project. Very vague answer. Maybe the other panelists have some tips here too as agency owners.
I'd like to jump in quick. So from the e-commerce fuel forum, which is all $1 million or more stores, I think there's a bias towards either hiring someone in-house, like a programmer in-house, once you get to a certain size, because you want someone who can keep the website. Like if your website's down for 5 days, you've lost a lot of money. Or they use an agency. I think the least used option is a freelancer. And I think sometimes freelancers can ghost you. So when you're thinking about like what you want with your business, you want them either a very trusted freelancer that you've used for a long time, or hire someone in-house or an agency that has SLAs that agree they'll respond to your issue in 20 hours, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. I think we're coming up on time. So I wanted to open the floor for any closing thoughts, from any one of our speakers today.
Yeah, I can add some thoughts. I think one of the best things about WordPress and WooCommerce in general is the community is so open with all of this stuff. So definitely seek out those groups on Facebook and on Twitter, ask your questions, do your research as well. Make sure you do your own research and you're not just relying on other people to answer things for you. But yeah, speak to the community, and yeah, they will be sure to help you.
Engage. Happy.
Could I tag on to what James said there? In that part of what makes that community so awesome is that there are so many people in it, so that when you come and engage and ask some questions, the next time someone else is asking a question you know the answer to, be ready to pay that energy forward. That's part of what is making the WordPress and WooCommerce specifically communities so great for so long.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
All right. with that, I'm gonna pass it to Lexi.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you again to all of our panelists. This is a community. These people aren't necessarily WP Engine customers. We just want to create a community to talk about plugins and to talk about topics. And that's really what we did. So thank you to the panelists and thank you to those of you that joined. We really appreciate it. This was part 2 of our 3-part series. As we mentioned, next Tuesday, same time, same place, we will be back to talk about artificial plugins. I think there's a lot in that space. We're not necessarily experts. I don't think anyone can say they're experts at this point, but we've got some interesting thoughts on the topic and some interesting panelists to join. So if you're registered for this webinar, you'll get the reminder for next week's. Other than that, we have relaunched our ultimate guide to plugins. Again, not WP Engine salesy, but more just putting together a list of plugins on various different topics. I know there were several people in here that asked questions on themes and on image optimization. There's a lot out there. Use the community and use your resources to continue to learn about plugins. And thank you for joining. We'll see y'all next time.